Analyzing this year's French Open final, I found some wild stats. And after investigating them, I found some strategies and tactics that you can copy to level up your game today. What's up team, Coach Joshua here from TennisTactics.com, and today we are analyzing the French Open final. So let's take a look at the rally stats. First, let's look at what kind of points were being played most often here. You can see we had about 55% of the points being short, so they lasted between 1 and 4 balls. And about 45% were longer, so they lasted 5 balls or more. This sounds about right for clay court tennis. But now I want to see who is winning what kind of rally. Okay, so as expected, we see a fairly similar winning percentage in short points for the server. But do remember that Carlos had more of these than Zverev, which means that his percentage is worth a little bit more. Okay, also interesting to see Carlos winning such a high percentage of return points in the 5 to 8 ball range on Zverev's serve. So he must have been neutralizing points really well somehow. And wow, look at the advantage Carlos maintained in the longer points when he was serving. Let's dive into that for sure. But first, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so I can bring you more tennis tactics. Alright, so let's look at the tactics behind the short points, the points that lasted between 1 and 4 balls. And I'm going to let the tape roll and divide the court into thirds here as we watch, and you can pick up on the pattern. So while Alcaraz and Zverev had similar winning percentages in this category, remember Alcaraz's advantage came in that he had more of these points. Now one of the reasons Alcaraz was getting more of these points is he was much better at using his serve or return as a setup shot rather than trying to win the point outright. It's well known that Carlos doesn't have the most powerful serve on tour, but in this match he used it well to set up his forehand, which was easily the most penetrating shot on this court. On points that lasted 3 balls, Alcaraz used his forehand ground stroke as the +1 to his serve 21 of 34 times, and he did a lot of damage with this combo. So Alcaraz's primary play was to the open court. Dividing the court in thirds really lets us see how purposeful he is about this target. He uses his serve to pull Zverev wide, and then he hits his forehand to the open court. And he's usually doing so with pretty good margin. Of these 21 serve plus forehand points, Alcaraz ran this specific tactic 7 of 21 times. As we're looking at these plays here, notice how well he is using his serve to move Zverev to the edge of the court and opening up space for his forehand. A key thing to recognize here is that he is spreading the court early and often. Feel free to rewatch some of these points and really look for this pattern. Now he does change things up and hit some other variations. For instance, he'll serve to different locations, he'll hit behind Zverev, he'll hit his classic drop shots. These are all good patterns to take a look at as well. But you want to keep in mind that Carlos distinctly has a primary pattern and then secondary mix-up patterns. We can learn from both. Alcaraz's drop shot is effective because he plays it every so often. If he played it every point, it would lose effectiveness. So about 45% of the points went 5 balls or longer. And this is what the French Open's known for, clay court tennis, long points. Now remember, Alcaraz and Zverev won a very even percentage of 5 to 8 ball points on Carlos's serve, but on Zverev's serve, Carlos had a significant edge. I want to look at why. Honestly, Zverev was serving pretty good in this match, but Carlos responded with great returning. And there's 2 things that were working specifically well for him. The first thing to call out is the depth of Carlos's returns. He was often standing further back in the court than normal, and this is so he could take a long, full swing at the return. And he was getting some great depth out of these shots. This allowed him to get into these points on more neutral ground. But the key here is he would start back, and then he would take a full swing, hit that deep return, and then move up in the court. Now the other thing that is absolutely essential here is look how Carlos plays these kinds of mid-range points. You can see that when he's returning, he starts these points by hitting cross-court for a few shots as he neutralizes the server's advantage. Once he feels a little more neutral, then he may look to change direction, but he often goes through this cross-court phase where he's just committed to finding the long line of the court. This is a great thing to learn from the Grand Slam champion. When you're returning, you're usually in a defensive position, so focus on depth and hitting through the long lines of the court. This is how we fight to keep the point neutral and keep our opponent from attacking. Also, if we remain committed to hitting cross court, our opponent has to hit down the line in order to make us run. If they hit cross court, it comes back to where we already are. And when they hit that safer shot cross court, it gives us a chance to settle into the point. All good lessons from the French Open champ. Now as the points continue, we start to see a few other patterns emerge. So any point that goes longer than 9 balls is considered an extended rally. Now normally, the longer the point goes, the less advantage in the point the server has. The points become more like a ground stroke game that's being played on fairly even ground. And that's exactly what happened in Zverev's serve, with each Zverev and Alcaraz winning 50% of these points. But that was not the case on Carlos Alcaraz's serve. In fact, he maintained the same winning advantage in points over 9 balls that he had in points that lasted 1 to 4 balls. He was winning 2 out of every 3. A lot of things were contributing to this, and I'd be really curious to hear what you think down in the comments. But what stood out to me is Carlos's ability to maintain an aggressive court position longer in the point. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Watch how he's usually closer to the baseline than Zverev is throughout the whole point. So while they're both running around side to side to cover court, Zverev is doing so from further back in the court. This means he both runs further and has a more narrow target to hit into, 2 things that make him more prone to errors. And that's not something we can overlook because a majority of these points end with a Zverev error. Now the other thing is that Carlos being closer to the baseline, sometimes on top of the baseline, sometimes inside it, it gives him a shorter distance to run and bigger targets to hit into. It also opens up his signature drop shot play. Now, there are some times when Carlos gets pushed back in the court, but look how he moves backwards and rolls that ball high and deep. And this keeps the rally neutral and gives him time to get back to being closer to the baseline. Lots of good stuff to learn from these points. Overall, my takeaways from this match had a lot to do with the longer points. 1, a great reminder of prioritizing cross-court balls in shots 5 through 8. 2, a great way to win longer rallies is to focus on winning the position battle by being closer to the baseline than your opponent. And 3, if your opponent does push you back in these rallies, just move back, hit that ball high, deep, cross court, giving you time to recover and keeping your opponent in a neutral position. If you want to learn more tennis tactics, I'll be dropping a ton of free content here on YouTube. So go ahead, like this video, subscribe to my channel, maybe ring the bell. And if you want even more tennis tactics, head on over to my website, tennistactics.com, to stay in touch. Until then, hit your targets. We'll talk soon.